Hello, Widowhood. We are about to have a conversation with Liz Cannon, who is a polyamorous widow. This should be very interesting and insightful. Let's get into the conversation now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Let's welcome Liz Cannon to the hood. Hello, Liz.
Hi.
So the question comes up, how did I meet Liz? Well, I'm always looking for people that want to share their journey. And I saw Liz on TikTok and she was sharing her journey. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for her to bring her story to the widowhood. So here we go.
Hi. I guess if you want me to just take the reins, I can give a little bit of a background.
Sure, go right ahead.
So I was married for 20 years to a fabulous soulmate, wonderful partner. He was a chef. His name was Josh Velasquez. And early in our marriage, I kind of guessed that his drinking might lead to some problems. He was, like many people in the restaurant industry, a heavy drinker. And I actually never saw him drunk. He was so good at drinking that he would start early on his shift and he would just keep drinking all day long. And I kept saying that you probably want to slow your roll. And he kept saying, you don't know my family. My grandmother used to drink a whole bottle of rum a day. And I thought, probably a small bottle. And he just continued. And I thought he would become ill when we were in our 50s or 60s. And instead, when he was 38, he became ill, and he became very ill. And I almost lost him 3 times in a row within about a month and a half. And the verdict was liver disease, cirrhosis, and his numbers were so bad that the doctor was trying to get him to have a transplant immediately. I had noticed that since he had just begun being sick and had stopped drinking, his numbers had dropped precipitously. His liver numbers. And I said to him, I am willing to go on this journey of seeing if you can heal yourself. And he tried. And he did a very good job initially. He was doing everything he was supposed to. And he did get a lot better. Unfortunately, he wasn't all better because you can't get all better quickly from liver disease. And one of his liver specialists made the mistake of saying, you know what we call you around here? What? He said, Wolverine. And I knew that was not going to be good. And sure enough, Josh started to do things he shouldn't have been doing again. And that wasn't really drinking so much as eating poorly, eating fatty things late at night, smoking cigarettes again. When you've got advanced liver disease, you have to take care of that thing like it's a little baby. And he knew that. But as time went on, it got harder. He got sicker again. He got depressed. And it became a vicious cycle of not taking care of himself. And I ended up being a caregiver the last 2 years of his life as ammonia started to affect his cognitive skills. And so I have so much respect for people who are caregivers to long-term ill spouses. I cannot imagine going on longer than I did, because 2 years almost broke me. And I learned so much about compassion from that.
You were just talking about Josh and making it through 2 years of caregiver and not sure how people could do that.
Yeah, and I'm amazed that people can be caregivers for long terms, because 2 years was so hard for me. And one of the things that I've wanted to do in sharing my journey of being a widow is also to say to people who are caregivers, that they need to take care of themselves too, because it's becoming an epidemic in this country, I think, of people who are struggling to take care of their spouse or other loved one, and they don't have that much support. We don't have a village anymore. We are viciously individualistic country, and that leaves a lot of people stuck where there's no one to help, and there is no safety net in this government. There is nobody coming to help take care of your spouse, and it's just hard. And I have so much compassion for the caregivers too. So I learned a lot about compassion through being a caregiver and watching him struggle and watching him try so hard to do the right thing and just not having the capacity to do it. So that's the other thing. Is I know we talk a lot about, there's like this community of TikTok widows, and we talk a lot about each individual person's journey. And one of those facets really is, for me, recognizing capacity, because where you come from is going to inform what capacity you have. So, for example, if you're a widow who knew that your spouse was going to pass away, that's going to create a different capacity on how to heal when you are trying to heal. Now what? Can you hear that?
I cannot. But
that's wonderful.
Let's make this a point in transition. So Liz, you jumped right into Josh. Can we back up a little bit?
Sure.
Tell me about you, who you are. Who is Liz Cannon?
So, okay, let's see. I am a daughter of a firefighter and a police officer in rural Maine. And when I say rural, I mean rural. My town was 1,000 people, and the town next to mine didn't have a name. It's a territory. There aren't enough people for it to be a town. So I had a very interesting childhood because I was so separated from a lot of greater societal things and didn't get exposed to certain things. My exposure to a lot of the world was through my parents, who happened to be very liberal for that time period and happened to be extremely liberal for rural Maine. And when I went to grade school, I was the victim of some incredibly deep bullying, the kind of stuff that they make movies and TV shows about. It's almost, the stories I could tell you are ridiculous, but it really toughened me up in later life.
But feel free to share one of the experiences and how that impacted you.
Literally on a daily basis, from the age of 5 until the age of probably 12, students would either harass me verbally and or physically. I remember one specific moment, this is just one of many, where all of the students turned to spit spitballs at me. This was in first grade, and the teacher thought that was super funny. That was her response.
I am so sorry. I mean, I have experienced my share for myself and others of being bullied when I was younger, so I can relate to that. It was very difficult. I think I can recall being bullied, especially in grammar school, right up into high school, and getting to a point that was like, I'm not going to have to tolerate this anymore, so I'm going to need to stand up for myself. Wasn't much of the hand-to-hand interaction with people, but the choice of this needs to stop. And what it took for me at that point, I'm 57, so we're talking in the 60s and 70s, and bullying wasn't frowned upon as much then as it is now, that there's a big movement towards doing that. So I can relate to how that shapes you as a person to some extent in that happening. So I'm sorry you had to experience, but I'm glad you endured it, because it is much different now, where people, very young adults, it is so intense, whether it's virtual bullying or people in person, where people are succumbing and taking their life because of that, because it seems so much when it's happening to you. You can't see past that situation. It will swallow you up. So I'm glad that mental health, suicide prevention, there are laws now against bullying that probably were not enacted when you were experiencing.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. You said there wasn't even a real awareness. I mean, kind of demonstrated by the reaction of that teacher, which was,
right. That is sad.
Funny. And it did toughen me up. It really did. And also, I think it gave me a very interesting perspective on being abused by the majority and being the other. And so when I went to college, I, interestingly enough, became super active with the Black organization at school. I was the only white member. And the rest of my life, I have found myself crossing lines, and I'm always kind of crossing lines in communities. So I have been a member of different African dance troupes since I was 17 years old, Afro-Brazilian dance troupes, Afro-Cuban. I practiced Santeria. My godfather was the head of one of the most respected houses in Cuba, in Matanzas. And I'm always an outsider everywhere I go. And I think that's why Josh and I really got along, because he was half Puerto Rican, raised in Connecticut and Tennessee, and he was too white for the Puerto Ricans, and he didn't speak Spanish, and he was too Puerto Rican for the white people. So he was always the other as well. And I
How
think
did you and Josh
really
meet?
Oh gosh, this is even funnier. I had just broken up with a girlfriend that I had been with for 2 years who was Brazilian, and ran off and got engaged with a Brazilian man almost immediately. And he and I had known each other for a long time. And then that Brazilian man broke up with me. And in the meantime, a friend of mine from college had been saying, you really need to talk to this guy, Josh. You really need to meet this guy, Josh. And I kept saying, I'm so busy right now. I have a fiance. And then when I didn't have a fiance, Josh swept in and said, hey, do you want to come over for dinner? And I went over for dinner, and that was the end of it, because he was one of the most amazing chefs I've ever met in my life. And the weight of my heart is definitely through my stomach. So we had a whirlwind relationship. I was 28, and I had been in some long-term relationships, some short-term relationships. And then I'd spent a long time being single, having fun with people, but being single. And I really knew who I was and what I wanted. And at that point, I wanted to settle down, and I really knew that. And I remember looking across the table at him. We were having Thai food, and we'd been dating for 3 whole weeks. And I thought to myself, if this man doesn't ask me to marry him, I have to leave. And the next day he asked me to marry him. I was in the middle
Whoa,
of
back up. 3 weeks of dating, and Josh says, will you marry me?
Yes.
How did he present that?
I was eating some of his gnocchi that he made from scratch, potatoes cooked in the pot, mushing it all up, making it, boiling it. It was in this white wine sauce that he would make that was out of this world. And I literally had the bite up to my mouth, and he said, will you marry me? And I had put it in my mouth by then, and I was just like, how can I say no? Well, I already wanted him to ask anyway. He didn't know that.
Right.
So we announced to our parents. His mother and he always had a very fractured relationship, which is part of what led to his alcoholism. He had a very violent father and a very distant mother. So I don't think she really cared when he told her.
Okay.
My mother, on the other hand, was very interesting because she knew me. She knows me so well. We were very good friends, and she's always known everything about me and my life. And she said to me, well, you know, your father knew at 3 weeks. He didn't ask me. He didn't ask me until 3 months, which everyone thought was crazy. But look at us. And they were together until my father died tragically at 49, suddenly, of either it was a heart attack or a stroke, no one knows. And my mom was 50. So they were together from 24 until then, after a very short whirlwind romance. So she could relate.
Okay.
And I have to say, that's also an interesting thing. I'm going to kind of jump forward really, really far.
No, we're going to get there. Put a pin in that. I want to know. So he asked you at 3 weeks, what happens from there? How long before the wedding, and what?
Oh, the wedding was soon after. It was soon after. It was on Cape Cod. And okay, so now we're going to get to something interesting about little Lizzie.
Okay.
I was already married.
Okay.
So he was my second husband. So what happened was, in the interim of me meeting Josh and us getting married, I also met another person, and I'm polyamorous. Okay. And that other person and I had long discussions about whether or not we were going to actually get sexually involved.
Okay.
but we were very emotionally involved.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Before meeting Josh, you were married to someone else already.
No.
Okay.
No. Okay, so let's try to get the timeline is kind of clunky.
Okay.
So I'm polyamorous.
Okay.
And Josh.
And let's back up to make sure, what does polyamorous mean?
Yeah, that's
just
true.
Because I don't want to assume that someone understands that. So if you can...
No, that's a good point.
Okay.
So I'm polyamorous, and there's a little bit of a discussion about what does that really mean, la, la, la. And it's interesting how it changes depending on different communities. But in my understanding and my usage of the term, it simply means that I am able and I enjoy having more than one romantic relationship at the same time. And I expect my partners to be able to have that same freedom. Whether or not they exercise it is up to them.
Okay.
So I have always been like that. I have never had a monogamous relationship, and I don't really understand them.
Okay.
I respect them. I don't really understand them. And when I first met Josh, I explained that, and he had never encountered it. Then we didn't have a word for it. I said, I have open relationships, and he had never encountered a person who had said that. And he thought, wow, that sounds brilliant. I've always kind of thought that was the smartest thing to do anyway.
Okay.
So,
so let's back up. So polyamorous, that's the multiple partners. Does that mean married to more than one person at a time?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And relationships can come in different forms, which is what happened with my other husband. So my other husband, who I still refer to as my other husband, he was a person I had met, and we developed a very deep connection, and we thought, because of the way it felt, that it was going to be romantic.
Okay.
And then we had to have some very serious conversations about that, because we were both a little confused and we didn't really know what we were doing. And we realized we didn't want to be romantically involved, but we wanted to be together. Okay. And we ended up getting married on paper.
And what year was that?
And that was in 2000. That was in 2000.
Okay.
And then Josh and I met right after I had met this person.
Okay.
And Josh and I were romantic.
And now you met Josh what year-ish?
Towards the end of 2000. So very soon after.
So you had married your other husband already?
I had married my other husband already.
Okay.
And we all lived together for about 6 years, because even though it's something that's so hard to explain to people, except for people who've had this kind of relationship. Okay. And there's a term for it now, which is it's a partner who you are platonic with. So people used to say platonic partner. And for some people, their platonic partner was a romantic partner and it shifted into a platonic. Okay. And for some people, it's always been platonic. And I've had people say again and again, well, isn't that just your friend? Doesn't that just mean it's your friend? And I cannot explain it to you. It is not. Okay. Ricardo is my husband. Okay.
You said you guys were married. I mean, I'm tracking.
He's still, and even though we did eventually get divorced, because I wanted him to have the freedom to marry somebody else on paper, and he wanted me to have the freedom to finally marry Josh on paper, which I decided against because of his alcoholism. But we had married first, Ricardo and I, and then Josh comes into the picture, and Josh and I are romantic, but he accepts Ricardo for what and who he is. Okay. And we all end up living together, and we moved to New Orleans together, and we have a great life together for about 6 years.
So how did you introduce this to Ricardo, Josh?
Everyone, I don't know, really just cared about each other. We just met each other all pretty quickly. And I am kind of a whirlwind person, which you're going to see in the rest of my life as we go forward. My dad always used to say, before he passed away, he'd say to people he knew about me, "Oh, Liz always jumps in head first, but that's why she's always okay."
There we go. Okay, so
it's just the way I function.
So you don't remember the first time you introduced Ricardo and Josh together, or what that conversation looked like, or anything?
I know, I really don't. It was it was very natural. They knew about each other, and then I was living with Ricardo. Okay. And then Josh and I couldn't live together for a while because he was working on Cape Cod. And
I see.
I couldn't, because of my work, I couldn't commute. So I would go to see him on the weekends and things like that. But I was living with Ricardo. Okay. And then we all moved in together. We all got a place together eventually.
What was
And
life like in New Orleans together?
oh, it was fantastic. And I didn't want to leave, but Katrina happened.
Mm,
So that that destroyed the restaurant Josh was working at, and we all ended up back in Boston. And Ricardo was supposed to be going to college, and college wasn't happening. And so he was at the University of Massachusetts, and it jumbled up our whole lives,
hmm
like many other people's lives. But again, we came out for the better in many ways, and I am fine with what happened for myself. I'm not fine for what happened for a lot of people I know. And
Right.
I lost people to suicide after, because
Mm,
of the struggle that they went through after the aftermath, and the just the destruction to everyone's reality, you know.
right.
I mean, if
That
you're
shook a
so,
lot of people, and it shook into a way that life will never be what it was before that.
and
So
some
that
people that was okay, but some people it wasn't.
right. And I don't want to minimize how Katrina impact people on an entire scale. And sorry for how that is done. I know as we stay in this particular conversation, speaking about your life. So you guys moved from New Orleans back to Boston, and you were saying that Ricardo, you guys divorced on paper to give you space to marry Josh. Okay.
Yeah, Ricardo kept saying, he calls me mama. He kept saying, Mama, I want you to be able to marry Josh. And I kept saying, honey, I'm not worried about that. And then eventually that's what we did. And also he was starting to get into a point in his life where he was thinking of maybe moving to New York City, which neither Josh or I wanted him to do, but people have to do things with their lives. And
Correct.
that's definitely something we would never want to stop him from following his dreams. And at that point, his dream was that he really thought he was going to be able to possibly start a photography career. Like many people who go to New York with a dream, it didn't necessarily pan out that way, but he's doing great. And again, we're still super, super close.
Okay.
He was supposed to be the person giving me away at my wedding,
Oh, okay.
but something got in the way of it as far as his work stuff goes, and there was really nothing to be done about it, and I understand. So
So what year did you and Josh get married on paper?
we never did.
Oh, you never did. Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of okay. I have never talked about this with anyone, but I did notice that there were some widows on TikTok that were saying if you weren't married on paper, you weren't married. And I thought to myself, honey, if I spend 20 years with someone and I'm taking care of them when they're dying, I'm sorry, I'm married.
Right. So and so there are many ways to look at it. But no, just so married. Okay, no, I'm tracking that. So but that's
Yeah,
part just how everyone's situation is different. And
yeah,
that's what this conversation is about, the reality that everyone that is grieving the loss of a loved one is different from everyone else. And not to say no to that, but just giving you space to talk about your journey. So
yeah.
thank you for pointing that out. How in whatever community you're in, people will try to validate or invalidate someone's position. Not what we're doing here, giving
Yeah.
you space to talk about what your life is and the person that you've lost. So you and Josh became an individual couple outside of
Ricardo. Yeah,
you almost
yeah.
said other husband. I was like, no, we have a name now, Ricardo. About what year was that, would you say?
2007.
Okay. And when did Josh start noticing that he was sick?
That wasn't until 2012.
Okay. So there was a bit of time of health and things going and just enjoying that part of life.
Yeah, yeah, and we
Okay.
did. Oh yeah, and we bought a restaurant together, and he named it Lizzie's, and
Aw.
that restaurant won best bar with food in New England for from the Yankee magazine,
Oh,
which
wow.
was
What type of
a lovely
cuisine?
thing. So it was kind of a mix because Josh was always kind of a mixed bag as far as what he likes to cook. So he could cook classic French. He was schooled at NECI, the New England Culinary Institute, which no longer exists, but that's where Alton Brown went. They were very science based. So he did Italian. He did some other stuff that was very random, but he did it very well. He could cook Ethiopian food like nobody's business. Ethiopian
Hmm.
people would be like, how did you learn to do that? So yeah, so the restaurant was a weird mishmash of food. And unfortunately, I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but from the beginning of owning the restaurant, he was having a problem with the economics of it. And I was baffled because he'd always been so good about books with every job that he'd ever had, every position he'd had as an executive chef. And suddenly he couldn't figure out what was going on with the finances. And that led to quite a bit of stress. And then about a year and a half into that restaurant when he started, I'm going to be a little graphic here. He started throwing up blood in the middle of the night.
Oh my, the stress was just that horrific. I can,
It was the liver disease.
oh, the liver disease, not from that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let
Yeah.
me circle back a little bit. So I have a major in finance and accounting, and I had my own accounting business for 13, 16 years and did bookkeeping. And what I found that people were extremely well at the subject matter expert part. So for Josh being the cook, but trying to manage your bookkeeping and strategically manage your business and take care of all those things, it can so easily just get lost. It's like
Oh,
the
yeah.
money's coming in, you're buying the product, and you're really not paying attention to the return on investment, ROI. There's enough money to come in and do that. And then little things like payroll taxes or sales tax and
Mhm.
tax returns will start coming in. And that will be the downfall because the rent, all the different things. So I say that to share, it's easier to happen more than not unless people start a business and they make a designated bookkeeper account, someone to hold
Mhm.
them accountable as they're running the day in and out of the business. So that is a downfall of a lot of people, unfortunately, because there's a lot to juggle in
No,
running a
I
business.
I am definitely aware that that's a thing, and that's how I understood what was going on at that time. I thought to
Right.
myself that that's what was going on. What I didn't realize is that he was having mental problems because the ammonia in his brain was keeping him from thinking straight.
Oh, on top of that. Now Josh is doing the business. What are you doing during the day when that's going on?
So I had just gotten my license and I had started my own law firm. I had started Liz Cannon, attorney at law, and I started immigration law practice. And I was super busy with that.
For
So
sure.
I would come by and I would check on certain things at the restaurant. And I would also check on, so when am I going to get a look at the books? What's going on? And I kept getting, yeah, I'm going to get to it. And I couldn't understand that because he'd always been so good at keeping the
Hmm.
books at these other businesses, even as he was running, quote, the business. Because when you
Okay.
are an executive chef, you're running the business. The
Right.
owner, half the time, the owner's never even there. They're coming by just to harass you from time to time. So, I mean, he essentially had been running the exact same type of business for a few years for a couple different companies. And all of a sudden, he's not able to do what he needs to do. And
Oh, the mental capacity just didn't
and,
exist with
and I've
everything.
always said to people that now that hindsight being 2020, if your partner suddenly can't seem to do something that they've always been able to do fairly easily, get them to a doctor.
That's a sign.
Maybe everything's great, but I've also met a couple other widows on TikTok who had similar stories where something, either cancer or some kind of disease, was eating away at their spouse's ability to
Mm,
function. And initially they thought to themselves, that's really funny. He's always able to do that thing. Suddenly he can't. Maybe he's just really stressed out.
right.
He must be really stressed out. But I'm telling you, if your partner suddenly can't do something that they've always been pretty darn good at, get them to a doctor, because you need to have at least basic blood work done, at least some basic look-see to see if we can figure out what's going on.
Is that a cat visiting us?
That was my cat making an appearance.
And what is your cat's name?
So I have two cats. They're Sundance and Butch and Sundance. And
Okay.
Josh named them. He named
Oh,
all of the pets. We also have Stogie, Cigar City Stogie, because we live in Tampa, which is a cigar city. It was founded on the making of cigars. And we also have Blue Bayou, who is a blue pit bull.
okay. So you're currently in Tampa, not in
Yeah.
Boston. Okay.
Yeah. We moved to Tampa in 2015.
Okay.
It was soon after he had been diagnosed and started to do better. And then the idea was, life is short. You don't know how long you've got. We had come to Tampa because I had a green card interview and we fell in love with Ybor. It was so much the historic area of Tampa is called Ybor City.
Okay.
And it looks so much like New Orleans because this is actually a Creole city. And we fell in love with it. And then when we looked at the real estate, we realized we could afford to buy a house, which we could not afford to buy a house in Boston, Massachusetts.
Dollar goes differently in different locations, doesn't it?
It was big time. And even me being an attorney who was doing pretty well, he wasn't able to work at that time because of his disease. And in fact, he never really regained his ability to work. He would try to work in a kitchen and he would just look so ill by the end of the afternoon that he couldn't do it. He couldn't work in kitchens anymore. So he tried to figure some other things out along the way. None of it really panned out. And then he got really, really sick. So
how are you balancing managing your business, your own firm, and caring for Josh?
I don't know. To this day, I have no idea how I pulled it off. I really don't. And on top of that, I was performing with the African dance troupe here in town. So I was rehearsing 2 or 3 times a week. I was working on different legislative campaigns. I was always a very active person. I was a community organizer back when I was a professional dancer. When I met Josh, I was a professional dancer. I segued into being an immigration attorney because I realized I was going to starve to death.
There is that, but I guess maybe the dancing was feeding your soul for all the other things that you had to show up in.
Oh, definitely. Oh my gosh, definitely. I mean, to today, dance, the kind of dance that I do feeds the soul amazingly. I just went to an insanely fast, wonderful class on Tuesday because one of my best friends here in Tampa is moving to Pittsburgh because she had a wonderful opportunity to be running the department there on mental health and the intersection of racism. And I don't remember, I wish I could remember the name of that program at the University of Pittsburgh, but that's what she's gotten a great opportunity to do. So our dance class on Tuesday was insane.
Was that her last one?
That's her last one. So
okay. She's an instructor. She was an instructor.
She's an instructor and a choreographer. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Kaya, she's one of the best dancers I've ever met as far as African dance goes. She can see a choreography and just remember it. And I'm thinking, how did you do that? So yeah, I don't know how I balanced my business and Josh. And then it did get harder and harder and things did have to go by the wayside. And in a bizarre way, COVID helped me because suddenly there were all these things I couldn't participate in anymore because they just shut down. And then I didn't feel the need to say yes to anybody anymore. Things that I'd already been doing. It was like, well, I don't have to tell them I can't do it anymore because it's not happening. And in a bizarre way, COVID was helpful for Josh and I. Also, I don't agree with what happened in Florida as far as policy and the way we carried on because so many people passed away due to the
that is a whole conversation.
The whole conversation
in itself. So we're gonna put a pin in that. The next time we talk, we'll unpack that.
Yeah, we'll not really talk about that. But for us, in a bizarre way, it was helpful because Josh could carry on living for the last year and a half of his life. He could go to a restaurant. He could go to a music show. He could go do things. And I will be forever thankful that he had those opportunities before he passed away.
When did Josh pass, if I may ask?
He passed on December 19th of 2021, right before Christmas. He had been in home hospice for 2 weeks. And back to things that I want to tell other widows. Home hospice might not be a good idea. You really need to find out what's available in your area and in your state, because I thought I was going to have some help. There was no help, absolutely none. One woman came by once a week and then once every 4 days to help bathe him. So
to that point, if you were to do this over, based on, like you said, the 2020, what questions, if home hospice was an option, what are 2 or 3 questions a person should ask to help them become more informed?
Number one, and I think this is huge, what availability of drugs will we have in the home? Because in Florida, you are not allowed to have any kind of liquid painkiller. And I did not realize that as a person progresses in their journey to the other side, they will not be able to take anything in their mouth. And you are going to have to crush up pills and put them in their cheek and hope that somehow that painkiller is getting through their system.
And I want to hold on for 1 second. So you mentioned something that a lot of people do not know, that, and correct me where I'm wrong or fill it in, that as we get closer to this body finishing its job in this world, the functions start shutting down because the body is trying to preserve the energy in other different ways, such as the ears being pinned back or the inability to swallow. So you think someone doesn't want to eat or they're not hungry, but that capacity is starting to diminish because the body no longer is taking in. So the
Yep.
need to reduce those tablets into something that could be swallowed is how that's happening. So that is a really important question to ask. So what type of medication based on your state law can you have available to you?
Yeah. What kind of
Okay.
form and what kind? Because I had wanted to have liquid morphine of some sort, and I wasn't allowed to have it. And instead, I
Okay.
had to crush up morphine pills and put some water in them to make a paste and then rub it in his cheek. And I couldn't get enough morphine in him at that point. So that's one thing, is the drugs. Another thing is, what will be the schedule? Who's going to be coming by and how and when? And this should all be something you should talk, if you know that you're going to be looking towards hospice. And often if you are doing at home hospice, you do realize it's going to be down the road at some point. So if you're going to be asking these questions, what kind of aid physically am I going to have in the home, if any? Because again, I know that there are some people who had someone coming by the home and helping them. That was not my situation. And I was in the first week and a half of him being in hospice all by myself, trying to take care of a 280-pound man.
Mm,
And that was not easy. And I am a power lifter, but there's only so much I can lift.
for
So,
sure.
that's another really huge question, I think, as far as hospice goes and end of life questions. And then also, because if you're trying to make that decision between, am I going to have them at home or if I'm going to have them at a hospice house or a hospice center? If you are going to have them at a hospice center, one of the other strange things that I didn't understand, and it wasn't explained well to me, was this idea of, he could go into hospice, but you might have to bring him back home. And so I thought to myself, well, why would I bring him into hospice? I think people need to have a really good, solid discussion with their doctor about what do they really think the outcome would be. Because if I had had a good discussion with Josh's doctor at that point, he would have said, honey, he's not coming home. They're going to keep him in the hospice house. They'll take care of him. You won't have to do all of this physical work. And he's going to have liquid painkillers. If I had known that, if he had known that.
Okay, hold on. You're saying at home could not have had the liquid painkiller, but if Josh was at the hospice center or care facility, he could have had, and
Yes.
that also would have, I guess, helped his last days of quality of life and care that would have been made available to him. Now,
Yep.
let me ask you this. What do you think is more of an emotional pull about having someone at home than having them in the center? What were some things that you were juggling or comparing between the two when you were looking at that decision?
Well, again, I felt at the time, by the time we were in that situation, I didn't get very good information. One of the providers, one of the doctors said, well, he wouldn't be getting anything different at the hospice house than he does at home. And I thought, that can't be true. There's got to be more. And I asked around and people didn't know the answer. Unfortunately, within less than a year of Josh dying, one of my very good friends died of pancreatic cancer, and I went through her journey. And because she was not partnered and because she didn't have adult children that she felt could really handle things, I was the person helping with a lot of different decisions as far as her end of life care. And I was there with her end of life. She did do hospice house because she saw what Josh went through. It
Mm.
was a whole different experience here in Florida for her. In the same town, in Tampa, she was comfortable. People were taking care of her 24/7. She had liquid drugs. And when she passed so gracefully and so quietly. Josh struggled to pass for 3 days straight. It was the most traumatic experience of my life. And I have been through school shootings. I have been through a bunch of other traumatic things in my life. That was nothing. Watching him struggle and die slowly for 3 days when he could have been eased out of that transition. And nurses who came by, the hospice nurses who came by would see him and go, "This is horrible." And I'm like, help me
Yes.
figure out how to do something. But it was like everyone felt like they didn't know what to do and they didn't know where to go. And you know, I would say, well, can we take him to the hospice house? And they're like, well, you won't get anything different there, which is not true.
Right.
It was exceedingly frustrating an experience for me. And I've decided that at some point when I'm ready, I'm going to try to see if we can change the legislation here in Florida so that people can have more options at home.
Right.
Our decision to have him at home was because he wanted to be at home, and he thought it was going to be one kind of thing.
Right.
I thought it was going to be one kind of thing. And then when we were in the midst of it, it was nothing like that.
So my gosh, Liz, I am so sorry. That it's one thing to lose your spouse, and as this journey is different, to literally watch them agonize and the suffering that he endured. That is a lot. That is a lot, being his wife, his lover, his companion, his friend, and watching someone you love like that suffer. That is a lot. And I suppose that's part of why you have become so vocal as you are sharing your journey on TikTok. And then with your friend that passed, they were able to find some value in his situation that other people have been educated, and not to have to endure that, and at least to ask the questions to know what it would look like between hospice, a center, and being cared for at home. So if you make that decision to care for them at home, at least you're aware of what you're signing up for, or the level of commitment that you're going to have. And I know it's a lot. If you want to take a moment as we're talking about all this, if there's other things you think people should maybe consider in that decision-making process, if you're comfortable with still talking about it.
No, I'm comfortable. It does.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that one thing that I hope is true is his physician was wonderful, his general practitioner. And we talked after Josh passed, and he insists that Josh's nervous system wasn't working the way it had been because he was so close to death. And so what I perceived as being painful probably wasn't. It was just his body trying to do what it needed to do to survive.
Okay.
So I do hope that that's true, but I really don't want anybody to go through watching their partner like that because it doesn't look good.
No, I am so sorry. I am so sorry.
And I didn't sleep for the last 3 days that he was alive.
I could see that, being by his side and wanting to do anything possible to comfort and let him know that you were there.
By then, luckily, I had my mother and some best friends come, and they had been helping, and then they had to leave because of different scheduling issues. We didn't know how long he was going to be with us. We had no idea.
Right.
And they had to leave, but they were going to be coming back soon. They didn't realize they'd be coming back literally the day after he passed, but
Oh, so all the people that were in the house supporting, their timing kind of was out of the house at these last final days.
yeah, the last 3 days. And I'm actually kind of happy about that. I really don't want my mother to have had that in a memory. She's gone through enough of her own things. She didn't need that in her head. But his sister was here, and she will forever be my sister because we spent that last 3 days awake together, you know, and it was just us, and I couldn't have done it without her. I could not have done it without my sister-in-law. So
That is wonderful.
It was rough. That was really, really hard.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because it is very painful. And thank you. And I'm sorry for that. How did you celebrate Josh after he was no longer here?
So we had 2 celebrations for him because he had friends in the north and he had friends in the south, and we wanted people to be able to kind of not have to go too far out of their way.
Okay.
And the one that we had up north, this is kind of funny, but it's very apropos.
We'll go for funny now.
I have a get together. I've only had a couple of them, but I call it the whiskey weekend, and we take over bed and breakfast on the coast in Maine in the middle of the winter. And it's very romantic. And we're all cuddled up around these fires in this inn, drinking our whiskey. Now, Josh couldn't come participate because he wasn't supposed to be drinking. Also, at that juncture, he didn't really like traveling on planes very much. It was kind of painful. So I would go and do the whiskey weekend by myself and other friends. And we had a whiskey weekend for Josh. So yes, he was an alcoholic, and yes, that is what took him down, but he would have loved that whiskey weekend.
You're celebrating his life. Was there a particular type of whiskey or?
Oh, just all kinds. Everyone
Okay.
brings a bottle, and we just try each other's, and it's not about getting blasted all weekend, because I think we're all too old for that. But it's more about like enjoying really nice whiskeys and really
And you're
nice
sipping that.
bourbon.
You're taking time
Sip,
enjoying.
sip.
This is
Oh,
not
yeah.
something this is not the days when you got a keg of beer and you're chugging stuff. This is
No,
one glass could last you for hours if it's correct. So
if it's the right
yes,
glass.
you're
Yes.
smelling and you're taking in the aroma. This is a different level.
Yeah, beautiful scotches, beautiful bourbons,
Mhm.
comparing tasting notes together,
Yes.
eating lovely charcuterie.
There we go.
It's a great weekend.
But you had a weekend that was celebrating Josh's life in a way that honored him.
Yeah, and something he would have loved to have known that we were. And the thing is, so we'll get to this in a second a little bit more, but Josh was there. Josh, his spirit was very present for a while after he passed. Initially, no. For the first couple of weeks, no. And then he came back. And when he came back strong. My mother doesn't believe in ghosts, supposedly, but she knows now, because there's I have too much footage of orbs in our we call them lanais. They're screened in rooms here in Florida. So I have a screened in room. I call it my she shed. And it suddenly had these very large, bright orbs setting off the motion detecting camera. And the orb would move around and then just disappear. And it would do that repeatedly over the course of a few weeks. He also moved a chair at one point in the lanai, and I have footage of that. But that's just what he was doing there. People can say whatever they want. I don't blame people for not wanting to believe in the spirit world, but I do. And and Josh talked to me. He talked to me with words, and I could hear him. And I will say I kind of demanded it. He hadn't been around. I hadn't felt him. Ricardo came. Ricardo was like, Mama, he's not here. I don't know where he is, but he's not here. I'm like, I know he's not here. Ricardo couldn't come while Josh was falling apart. It was too much for him.
It is a lot.
He couldn't handle it. And I don't blame him. Again, I learned a lot about capacity. I'm not angry at the people who couldn't come. I'm not at all.
Everyone is not made for every part of our life, and people show up how they can. And much rather, to me, for people to be honest about what they can and cannot do before now you're trying to manage them and the situation you're in. So
yes,
we are not made. And I'm sure you have found out the things that you didn't even realize you were capable of doing until they came to you and accepted the challenge of what life presented.
Yes, exactly.
So I can totally understand that. So you said 2 celebrations. One
was in the whiskey weekend, and that was in Maine. And then people from his life in Boston and that time period came to that one. And then we had one here in Tampa, and we had it in the lanai. And friends from Tennessee who he had known when he lived there came. Friends from here came, and both of them were lovely. They just really were. So many funny stories got told. So chefs are funny guys.
Okay, you want to share one of the stories if you recall any?
They're not appropriate.
What this is not for 18 and under. This is for adults.
Oh, I suppose. Golly.
Well, you don't have to, but you're welcome.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think of one that's a little bit more PG.
Yeah, okay, we'll skip over it then. So both celebrations were good. Okay, Well,
I was just thinking. I was like, there was the time. I still can't really quite tell the story, but there was the time when he and a chef friend of his got kicked out of a bar in New York City. And who gets kicked out of a bar in New York City at 4
that takes a lot.
Yeah, they were really blasted.
Okay.
And his friend was dating a woman who was a performer on Broadway. And they all started canoodling a little too much, is what happened.
Ah.
All three of them. And the bartender came over and back to, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate thing, but it was funny. The bartender was deaf, and the bartender said, "Hey guys, it's way too early in the day for this kind of shit, so you gotta get the fuck out." I was like, that's how you got kicked out of a bar in New York. Okay, good job.
Oh my gosh. So there was nothing that he would not do for a good time, it sounds like.
Oh, he was ridiculous. And he was also he was the nicest guy to a fault, which goes back to not taking care of himself and putting himself out there too much for other people sometimes, especially when it came to work. As a chef, he would work sometimes 120 hours, 140, and he shouldn't have done that. So that also really hurt him physically over the years. And that's part of the reason why chefs end up being such victims of substance abuse, is because your body actually hurts.
How old was Josh when he passed?
47.
47. That was very close to, you said your dad at 49. Did I hear that correctly? Wow. What do you remember the most? Like, if you thought of like your favorite when you think of Josh, what are some of the great memories that you've had with him?
Oh my God, I have so many fantastic memories with Josh. So we traveled to the south of France because we had a man who worked for the airport, and he had done English as a second language classes and stayed in our apartment. And we became friends with him. And oh man, we just ate our way through the south of France and drank so much rosé wine. And oh, it was amazing. Oh, that was such a good trip. And this is a really good memory. We're leaving. We've been eating and drinking for 2 weeks straight. I mean, we were done. We were done. And we get on this little plane that's going to take us from Marseille to Paris. And then from Paris, we're going to go to Boston. It's a 35-minute flight. To this day, I'm sure that the people working on the plane had some kind of game about, let's see who we can get trashed early in the morning on this plane. The guys who were working as employees for this airline were very scruffy. They all looked like they were hipsters, which is an interesting look for a bunch of people who are working on a plane. And they would come by, like they came by immediately and saw us, and we were dressed in our leather jackets and whatnot. And they said, it's 11 in the morning, mind you. They said, would you like something to drink? Well, I'll have some orange juice. Okay, to me. Josh says, I'll have some orange juice. He looks at him and goes, You want some orange juice? You don't want a beer? Some wine? And this man plied us with alcohol for that 35 minutes.
Short flight.
We could barely get off the plane. We were like, I think we each had 3 drinks.
I thought you were going to say mimosa since it was an orange juice, but he went a whole different way.
No, this guy went for he went for wine and beer, which is what he had. But it was just like, it was ridiculous. And we were like, we get off and we were in Charles de Gaulle, I think. And we were literally just like, where are we? How do we get to our plane? Like, how did this happen to us? We're supposed to not be drinking. It's 11 in the morning.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
This is all before we realized he was sick. This is well before we realized. So we had a lot of fun. And it wasn't always about drinking, I'll tell you that. I found it interesting that when he passed, it was hard to remember the bad times.
They do seem to just like move away. And I don't know, but for me, what is important at that point, and what is important is that love and what were those good times. Because they're generally, if we're lucky, there's more good times than there were bad times.
Yeah. So Josh and I never fought.
Oh, wow.
And to be honest, me and my new partner, my now husband, we never fought. And
okay, you just threw that in there. So we didn't even. Okay. So hold on. So when you and Josh were together, were there other relationships as being polyamorous, and how did that work?
So the idea always was, you can have whatever kind of relationship you want. And if you fall in love, that's fine. And if you fall in love and you want to leave me, that's fine, because I will be okay. And I wouldn't want to stop you from doing what you want to do. That being said, I never imagined falling in love with someone and wanting to leave Josh. I did fall in love with a woman in 2012, right before he became ill, and he did too. We weren't looking to have a situation where both of us
The
fell in
same
love.
woman or two different?
Same woman.
Okay.
We were not looking for that scenario. It just happened. It was a person I had been friends with for 10 years already.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to visit, and one thing led to another, and we started this very intense relationship, all three of us.
Did she move in with you guys?
She said she was going to, and then she didn't.
Okay.
And when she didn't, that's when Josh decided he wasn't going to continue with the relationship. And he said,
Okay.
you can do whatever you want, but I'm out. She's terrible at communication. She's on the other side of the country. She was living in California. He was
Mhm.
he's like, I'm not doing this. And I myself couldn't seem to get myself out of the relationship for another year. And again, it was long distance at that point, and we weren't seeing very much of each other. So it's not like it took up tons of my time,
Okay.
but it took up mental space.
Oh, for sure. It starts there. That's fair. That's totally fair. Any other relationships with Wild Josh or no?
Not something that was so deep. Lots
Okay.
of like lighter relationships where it was just like, oh, this is a friend, we're having fun, but
Nothing of really depth to it.
I wasn't deeply in love. That was the only time I was deeply in love with a person that I was actually involved with. There were a couple of people along the way who I was in love with, but they weren't in love with me.
That's fair. It was not mutual.
That it wasn't mutual, and that's fine too. Josh never had any other serious partners either. Again, we were open to it, but I guess I'm kind of a picky person in some ways.
Okay.
I don't have that many people I've met in my life that I feel that deep a connection to,
I see.
where I want to have a serious relationship with. But I do have lots of friends in my life who I've had romantic feelings with that weren't quite so intense. It was like,
That was the
oh,
word I was thinking. Okay.
I feel romantic about you, but it's not, I don't feel this need. We call it in polyamory, we call it the relationship escalator.
Okay.
And it's like, I don't feel the need to put you on the escalator. Where you are is just fine. You don't have to move up into hey, I'm moving into the house, or hey, I'm, gonna be called your girlfriend, or hey, I'm gonna be, called your wife. Like I haven't had that happen very often.
So now we'll jump into your current husband. So since that is not something that you give yourself to, since you're so picky, at what point, like how long had Josh passed into this relationship?
So Josh had only been gone for a little over 3 months, almost 4 months, actually.
Okay.
And I had gone through a period where I tell people, like, I went through this initial period when he passed where I was shattered in a way that I was never expecting. I thought, oh, I've been through grief before. I've lost a good friend when I was 19 in a shooting at my school. I lost my father when I was only 22. I've got practice at this. I'll be fine. And I was not fine. And I really went through an existential reconstruction of myself that I was not
So let's
expecting.
back up, Liz. I don't want to belittle that. Those words could mean different things to different people.
True.
Would you mind sharing, like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think sometimes when someone throws out the word existential, people might just jump to this idea of, oh, she was depressed and she wanted to kill herself. It's like, no, that's not where I was at. I was literally I put it that way, existential, because I was questioning reality. I couldn't figure out if reality was what I thought it was anymore. Everything was thrown into such a level of questioning for me. Who am I? What is my purpose? What is the purpose of all of this? But not in a way that I was depressed, just in a very honest existential questioning kind of space. And I would often tell people, I feel like I'm floating. I don't really feel like my feet are on the ground. And I started going back to my normal routine only 2 weeks after Josh passed, because it was super important to me to do that. I am a person of certain exercise routines, and I started going back to the gym and going back to dance class. And I found that I wasn't very physically present, even while I was doing these physical things. I just
That
felt,
widow fog, that,
oh, it wasn't even widow fog.
oh,
I felt like I wasn't really in this reality
that's
sometimes.
part of that fog. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Okay.
Yes.
I
The
really,
brain is detached and you're someplace else and you're not present. Yeah.
and yeah, and I was like, I was literally on another plane of existence half the time, where I really felt like part of me was on the other side of death. Like it was on the
Okay.
other side of that veil. And initially, like I said, Josh's spirit was not present. It wasn't
So
around.
even more of an absence and a gap and loneliness with that. Okay.
Yeah, and at first I was fine with it, because when he was dying, when he was actively dying, he said to me and to my mother and to my very good friend Michelle, he said that there was a woman who needed his help, and we all said, "Well, who is it?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And we'd say, "Well, what she look like?" He said, "I don't know." He'd get frustrated, and we're like, "It's okay, it's okay." And when he passed, I figured that's who we went to. I don't know
Mm,
who that woman is. I have no idea,
okay.
and no one has told me that they think it's them.
Okay.
Well, I don't know who he went to, but he went to go help whoever that is, I am sure. And
Okay.
then and then he wasn't around and he wasn't around, and I started to get frustrated.
Okay.
And I am a person who, I do believe in the spirit world, and I feel like I have had connections with other spirits in my life, and including my father who passed. And I suddenly just decided I'm just going to start asking Josh to show up. And I remember one day I was at the beach, and it was, let's see, probably late February,
Mm-hmm.
mid-February, and the water was barely warm enough to get into here in Tampa, but I got into it and I was screaming and yelling at him and just saying, "You just need to come and talk to me. I just need you to come back, because I can't deal with this without knowing that you're around. You have got to come back." And then he did.
Oh. What was the
And
first instance of him coming back? And do you remember what he told you?
well, first there were the orbs in the
Okay.
lanai. So he was haunting the lanai by turning on the motion detecting camera with these orbs of light. And then I started hearing him. I would say something and I would hear him say something and I'd go, "Hey, that's you." And I could feel it.
Mm,
And again, skeptics can say, "Well, that's your own head and you're just inventing." That's fine. They can say that. I don't really care.
right.
In my mind, I know that that was Josh. And then he was very, very present in the house all of a sudden. It wasn't just a little bit, but he was here almost all day, every day for a little
Mm,
while. And then I was feeling better and better about me. I was meditating for the first time in my life, which is something I had always thought I should do, but I never seemed to be able to do it. And all of a sudden I could do it. And I was working a lot with my godfather, who was the head of a very important house for Santeria. We don't call it Santeria there, we call it Arara or Lukumi, and he was the head of the house of Arara, La Paloma in Matanzas, and he was helpful. My god brother in Cuba was so helpful. These were
mm-hmm.
people, and then honestly, I was on the phone all the time with friends and family. I was one of those people who, I like, some people close themselves off and don't talk to anyone. I was on the phone all the time. I was like, "Hey, what you doing? Hey, want to talk? Let's talk."
Because you're up at all hours of the night when this happens.
Oh yeah, I had friends like in LA that I'd call
Yes.
because I knew that they'd be awake. Or I had a friend in New Zealand I'd call because I knew she'd be awake.
That becomes really important to be able to have people to do that. That I can relate to that. I
you
can
know,
relate to that.
and it helped so much.
Yes.
And in that time period, I had also started posting on Facebook. And again, my Facebook is very private and very curated. So it's only people who really know me. And I started getting really good feedback from people about, "This is so wonderful for me to read, because not only am I being able to see how you're doing, but I'm also learning so much about the process of grief," which, to be honest, I didn't really know anything about.
So you were kind of using it as a blog and just really pouring your emotions out as things were going. How did you find that helpful for yourself after writing or sharing? How did that feel for you?
Oh, always. And mostly it was because of kind of the reactions that people would give me in comments and stuff. Or somebody would call me and say, "Hey, I saw your post today," and I was, figured I'd call and we'd talk. And it was super unifying and helpful for me. And I know it's, everyone's ability to share is different and everybody's desire to share is different. But I found all of that work I was doing on Facebook was super, super helpful for me. And like I said, I got good feedback from people about it being helpful for them learning too. So that was good too.
So you said something I want to circle back to, Liz, that you had no idea what grief was. What did you find grief to be compared to what you may have thought of it before?
Oh, no, this is people were saying to me that they didn't know what grief was.
No. You were saying before about with your dad, with your friend, you thought you were going to be able to handle this because of past experience. This, in comparison, like what you thought it was, what it was, and now you're looking back on that. What does that look like?
Okay, yeah, that is a big thing that I was not expecting. So again, I had lost a good friend when I was 19. We'd gone through a shooting at our university, our college, not university. And then my father died when I was 22, suddenly, unexpectedly. And there's a lot of grief in those situations. And, when I lost my friend in the shooting, I had PTSD for a while. I mean, there was a lot to work through and a lot to process. And I thought that I would be more prepared to lose my spouse. It was nothing like those situations. And I don't know exactly why. I guess part of it's just because this person's with you all day, every day, I guess. I don't know exactly, but the grief that I went through from losing Josh was absolutely nothing like the grief I'd had for my father, nothing like the grief I'd had for my friend, absolutely nothing. And again, it put me in that a place of spiritual breaking point almost, which was in the end fine for me because I rebuilt myself. And back to capacity. Not every widow or widower has the ability to do that, or do that quickly, or to do it at all. I definitely know, I've known people in my life who were widows or widowers who that break, that spiritual break, that emotional break, it just stays broken. I don't know why I was able to work through so much stuff so quickly, but I was feeling really good about me and about where I was at and about my future and my life. And that's when I decided to go to an adult roller skating class because I wanted to try something new. And the very first class, this gorgeous man starts talking to me. And I think to myself, who is that? And that was Gabriel. And he surprised me by continuing to talk to me that first adult class, even though I didn't know how to roller skate and looked like a completely ridiculous mess on the roller skating rink. And then he continued to talk to me after the class. And I was so befuddled and I was so flustered that I kind of ran out of the roller skating rink going, what is going on? Is he flirting with me? He couldn't possibly be flirting with me. I'm a widow. I'm done. I'm old and haggard and I'm over and I will be a spinster for the rest of my life. That's where I was at in my brain. And I ran out of that roller skating rink and I kid you not, heard loud and clear Josh say, but I wrapped him up with a bow. And I went, what did you just say? And he didn't say anything else. I went, okay, I guess we're just gonna have to see about this. And I went back to the next roller skating class the next Monday, and Gabriel was there, and we exchanged phone numbers, and we went out on our first date that first Friday. And I thought, what am I doing? I am not ready for this. This is a stupid idea.
What did you tell anybody you were going on a date? And if so, how did they respond?
Oh, I told all kinds of people, and they were all like, you're Liz Cannon, you're gonna be just fine.
Okay.
Because in my group of friends, I'm well known for being the one who can run around and have romantic fun. And
okay,
you're Liz Cannon, you'll be fine. Just go. So that first date, I was floored. I could not believe how emotionally intelligent and put together this man was. And when I did finally tell him I was a widow, on that date, his response was just perfect. I said, I've been talking to you and asking you quite a few questions about yourself, but you haven't asked me too many questions about me. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said, yeah, so are you going to ask why I'm single? And he said,
that is the question when dating. Why are you in this predicament?
and he said, well, I was, kind of wondering. And I said, well, I'm a widow. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, how does that feel?
Mm.
How is that for you?" And I was just like, "Oh, well, let me tell you." And I just started telling him about Josh and about the experience that I'd just gone through. And he was only interested. He only had curiosity. And then as time went on and we started dating, Gabriel would come by the house and he said he could feel Josh every time he came in.
Mm.
And he said, and it's not unpleasant. It's very pleasant. He's here and he's looking out for you. And then we'd only been dating for about 3 weeks. And I said, you got to meet Ricardo. You have to meet my other husband. Because Ricardo's got to know that this is okay. Because Ricardo was a little worried. He's like, what are you doing, mama? What's going on? Especially because Ricardo's Colombian. And he is aware that there is a strong penchant for toxic masculinity amongst Latino culture.
Okay.
It's not everybody, but it's quite common.
I see.
And Gabriel is half El Salvadorian and half Mexican. And when Ricardo heard that, he got worried. He's like,
okay.
What kind of guy is this? Because Ricardo is not a toxic masculine kind of guy. So I bring Gabriel to New York City to meet Ricardo, and Ricardo falls immediately in love with him too. He's like, this guy is great. This guy is great. I'm so happy for you. I am so happy for you. And then as we were spending the weekend with Ricardo and his fiance, Kristen, Ricardo at one point turned to me and he said, Josh was just here and he said he's going to stay with me. And I said, good, because you guys need to spend some time together. And when I didn't say anything to Gabriel about that. And then when we got back to the house, I said, after a couple of days, I said, so have you felt Josh in the house at all the last couple of days? And he went, come to think of it, no, not at all. And I said, yeah. I told him what Ricardo had told me. And Gabriel's like, I believe it. I believe it. And Josh stayed with Ricardo for a little while, for a couple of weeks. And then he came by. And over time, Josh's presence is here, but it's less and it's less.
Okay.
And I think it's as he's feeling like I'm okay.
Now, you talked about social media. When was the transition from Facebook to TikTok? And I want to throw that in because I think you recently mentioned something about Josh and being in the house around the wedding. So yeah, I want to share about that. So what brought you to TikTok? How did that work?
So Gabriel's the one who got me more into TikTok. I had an account. I never went on it. And I was like, yeah, whatever. That's that thing for the kids to do the dances. And then, by the way, because I don't know, people can't always tell, I am 49 years old. So I'm no spring chicken.
Child, neither am I. So we have to, I am 57. I own that proudly. So yeah, I'm good with that.
Right. And Gabriel is only 28.
Oh, okay.
So that's been an interesting thing too, because you wouldn't know it. And my mother, when she was just here for our wedding, she kept saying to everybody afterwards, she's like, I just don't see it. I just don't see the age difference. I just don't. We are very well matched in many ways. But because he is that much younger, he's very tied into TikTok. And he uses it in a way people of his generation do, which is in actuality, he gets a lot of information from it, for better or for worse. Sometimes there's different news things that come through, but he was on it. He got me looking at it more. And then I started to realize that this isn't just, little clips of people dancing. This is actually people posting some pretty interesting content. And then I started finding some widows and I started watching their content. And then I started asking a couple of people I know, I said, I'm thinking about maybe posting some TikToks about being a polyamorous widow, because there aren't that many people out there doing that. And there aren't that many people talking about it. And there seems to be people talking about being polyamorous on TikTok and people talking about being a widow on TikTok, but there aren't that many people like me. And I think I have a perspective that could be kind of interesting to other widows too, even if they're not polyamorous. And some people said, yeah, you should do it. You should do it. You should do it. And then I did. And I got a pretty good reaction in the first video. And I thought, well, I guess I'll keep going. And the first couple of videos I put up, there were some widows and widowers who said, I am so thankful to have found you. And that really got me hooked. That really did. And And anytime I put up a video and I get a response from someone saying, you really helped me out today, that's just, it's
Yes.
everything. It's everything.
So what is your community? You talked about a community of widows that you connected with, and you can, blow somebody up and share what their hashtag is, or just mention how it's been
Oh,
helpful for you
I
personally.
definitely want to do that. So,
Yes, so feel free, because and make sure I have those to listen to bios of different people, and I'll put your widowhood community, include these people, so because people can check them out, because everyone sharing something there on that platform is
yeah.
something someone can gain something from as they go through this journey.
Yeah, and I think obviously some of us widows connect with other widows a little bit more. There's just something
Yes.
about each other. But one of the interesting things I have found, and I love it, is that I am connecting with different widows who we're coming from disparately different backgrounds. They might be highly religious in a Christian type of way. That's not me.
Hmm.
They might be coming from a space that is, for lack of a better word, a little bit more conservative.
Okay.
That's not me. I'm incredibly liberal, but there's something about our widowhood that connects us. And I
Yeah,
think
it
we're,
kind of puts everything, shuts it out. It's like, okay, you're dealing with the death of your person. Sometimes a lot of things that would have separated people become irrelevant, because they're all trying to understand how to endure, how to live, how do I get to creating what my life looks like. It does have a way of shifting a lot of the things that are not that much of a focal point, because this is now front and center.
yeah. And it's not like I'm giving those things any,
No, no, no. You're not degrading them, the credence, but it becomes, this is a point of connection, and
yes,
this is what it's more of a focus on. That relationship is not focused on someone's faith, their religious belief, their political beliefs, their ideologies. It's about, my person died. How are you coping? I want to hear, because I need to take some of that for me and how I'm coping, only as it relates to that particular parameter.
exactly, exactly. And in the end, I think it's been also interesting because I think different people have learned to be a little bit more accepting of other people because of this experience, which is nice. I that makes me happy. So to blow up some people, there's the real Sherry, and I'll get you hashtags. I love her because she, like me, said, hey, I'm going to choose joy. And not everyone can do that. But for both she and I, we both said, okay, we lost this person. They were incredibly wonderful for us. They were a soulmate, but there might be another soulmate out there.
Fair.
And I really do believe that Gabriel is my second soulmate. I really do.
Mm.
I I just really do. And he feels that I'm his soulmate. And
Mm.
we're in this journey. And the reason why we decided to have a commitment ceremony was because we're in this journey for the long haul. And we weren't expecting that when we started dating, but here we are. And Sherry, she's like me. She's like, let's choose joy, and let's also choose relationships, and let's see where it goes. Um,
Okay.
and she has found a new person right now where things are working out well right now, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm super
Okay.
happy for her. There's another woman who goes by North Woods, and I just think that she's funny and fun, and I like her content, and
Okay.
I love her to death. And then there's the real Karen too, because TikTok had a problem with her first account. So we got to go to the second account because we got a support girl on her second account.
Okay.
I just love her. She is like, so the metamorphosis of some people when they lose their person can be amazing and
Yes.
beautiful. And Karen realized that she could do all of these things by herself, and she has started her own contracting business, and she remodels houses, and
Oh,
she's
wow.
amazing at it. She can do so many things. I am so in awe of her talents. And then she can also put on some amazing makeup.
Oh, she can build a house and put your makeup on. Okay, Kia.
And I can't do makeup at all. So
Well, you don't see me over here with anything either. So
I'm like, wow, you know? So, and again, some of her stuff, super funny, just super enjoyable. But then, all of us, we're also sharing moments where we're in a lot of pain.
yes.
And then there's the person who got me to you, who I found not too long ago, who makes my life, and that's the real Black Widow, the literal Black Widow.
Yes,
Oh
Lou.
my God. She is hysterical.
She is.
I love her. It makes me want to do more TikToks that are more biting humorous, but I can't figure out quite how to do them. Maybe I can figure out some more of them. I don't know. She's just so freaking funny.
She
Uh,
is. She is a hoot. We actually met this weekend in DC and met in person. The
I was so
TikTok that we
jealous.
that TikTok that we did, I mean, we talked, I mean, just heart to heart, just sharing. And I think it just like 2 hours just flew by. I was in DC visiting another friend and I texted her and said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to drive to DC if you want to chat." And she's like, "You're going to be in DC this weekend?" I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "I'm going to be in DC this weekend." I was like, "Oh my gosh, like for real, for real, for real." And it was like we met up and it was just like we had known each other like just so organic.
Forever. Yeah.
Yes, and it
Yeah.
was such a wonderful connection. I mean, we'll stay connected. She is part of one of the things that Widowhood will talk with Tina. So this is a 501c3 nonprofit, and different arms of it are the podcast that we do weekly, giving space for people to share their journey. We have lawyers, financial people talking about heartfulness, a lot of different things on the podcast as people sharing their journey and providing tools on how to manage grief. The other thing is we have a Facebook group where people share content, and then we have a private Facebook group where we meet up once a month virtually. We have a book club going over books about grief and giving space for people to talk with someone. You don't have to qualify your feelings and explain everything. And to be able to do that in October, we're having a conference on how to manage grief for mental health professionals. So the 501c3 is providing opportunity to support people that are grieving, because as we're coming out of COVID and so many people have lost loved ones in private and really have not had, as you talk about that individualistic living or community with them, they're suffering silently in
Yeah.
private and reaching out to social media in ways like never before to understand, how do I do this? So the
Mhm.
people that you're mentioning, I hope that someone looks at each one of their TikToks and grabs something that can help them in this process.
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. And again, different people relate to different people
Yes.
differently too, right? So, I mean, it's not like every TikTok that every creator makes, I'm like, oh, that really resonates.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but there's so many things that I think because of our widowhood, you do resonate. And then the other thing too is I do like being able to be here and be helpful to anybody when I can be helpful too.
Yes.
And you and I had talked about this when we were doing our preliminary discussion. One of the things I know that does set me apart from a lot of widows, but I feel like I can be an example in a way, even still, is because I'm polyamorous, it was so easy for me to imagine loving someone else. And I
Oh,
don't think
yes. We wanted to
that's,
talk about that.
yeah, I don't think that's easy for a lot of widows, but I want to be there to give them the idea that maybe that's fine. Maybe it is fine, and you shouldn't feel guilty about loving someone new. And that even just being, by example, someone who is experiencing joy in a new relationship, to say, you can do it, and your
Right.
person isn't going to be angry at you because you have joy.
Why do you think that's a very interesting thing to talk about? The idea of finding joy. It does not diminish the relationship, the who that husband was, who that wife or that partner was, because you continue to live. But there is a lot of struggle in that idea of, I'm alive. Should I feel guilty because I've continued to live? Have I disrespected my partner? Have I done something wrong? And it is a lot to work through mentally, physically, and spiritually to get to that place to say, I can love somebody else again. The
Mhm.
possibility can exist. Not that my full happiness rests in creating another relationship.
No.
That peace and that rest generally needs to be independent. And once you've done some of that work with yourself to say, I could see myself in another relationship and engage that, that can be something that people are yearning to understand. How do I unwrap my mind around this person I've been with to be with someone else?
And I think it is a huge challenge for most people. And I know that there are people who are never going to be able to get away from that.
Right.
But I'm hoping that some people, and like the real Sherry too, she says, you know, her situation was different than a lot of people's because she knew he was going to pass away. It was a progressive thing. And he even gave her permission to love again. That can be a big deal difference for some people,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, again, we keep saying this and it's so true. Everybody's journey is different. But I do hope that people can see my steps as I've come along, because I started posting on the year anniversary of Josh's death.
Okay.
And here we are. It's only been what,
18 months. You said 20,
yeah. It was
21 December.
yeah,
So a year and a half. We're in
year and a
June.
half. Yeah, I was gonna say it's only been 6 months since my first TikTok, and I just had my wedding with my partner, and it was beautiful. And when my brother came into the backyard where we were having the wedding, he said, I just went into the house and Josh is sitting on the couch. And I said, he is? And he said, yeah, and he's happy. And I said, good. But I kind of knew that. And then somebody else also said they saw him. So it's, you know, he was here. He was here. And I honestly do believe that Josh brought me Gabriel in a lot of ways. And a lot of my friends feel the same way. They feel extremely strongly that there is a connection between all three of us. And they can see it and they can say it. Ricardo will often say, oh, well, you know, Josh is just working his way through Gabriel sometimes.
So how does it feel to be in a marriage again, be in love? And I want you to talk about that is still what it's like to still miss Josh in the presence of this joy. Because I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
people think that you've gotten remarried, you don't think about the other person. That's over, that's in the past. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think also that's one of the reasons why I'm able to be in this relationship is because Gabriel has always been so open and able to be with me when I am in grief. And he has encouraged me to share my grief with him because he says, I want to be here to support you. I don't want you to hide it from me. I don't want you to pretend that it's not happening. And he has seen me in the middle of a grief wave.
Now, hold on for a second. That's not something you can put on your dating app. I need you to understand that I will always love my belated spouse, and I need you to be okay with that. It is really kind of important to find somebody that will give you space. I've seen people say, well, I'm dating somebody and they don't want me to mention my late spouse anymore. They don't want me to talk about. I don't know how that would be suffocating. That would be very difficult. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you mentioned that because that is very key.
I don't even think that, I mean, I can understand that a new partner might not want you to go on and on about your spouse, of course, but to mention them, to talk about them, to bring them up, to say, hey, I'm missing them today. You know, I think, and as time has gone by, my grief waves are less and less. My difficult times are less and less. And that's to be expected, right? But it's not like it's gone, you know?
No.
And the strangest, as you well know, the strangest things can trigger grief. Like
Oh my gosh.
you can just do. Oh no, I saw this thing, or I heard this thing, or whatever. I smelled this thing,
I
and
went
now
to this store, I drove past this place, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, but what I have learned is you talked about that grief wave that may have happened initially could have taken me out where I couldn't get up out of bed. I was incapacitated. Don't talk to me for 3 days. Now it may be an hour. It may be I need to clear my schedule because I realize that's the anniversary of this and I'm not going to do well. I need to spend some time looking in photo albums, allowing that to just give me space where before it's kind of like strategic. And then it's other times like, okay, I'm just going to pull the car over, let this happen, and then I can actually drive.
yeah, and sometimes it is that fast, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I'm good, and sometimes it's not that fast.
At all.
You know, and I have felt that I am incredibly blessed that I have this partner who is so supportive. So the other thing is, this goes back to a certain degree, though, to the idea of polyamory. Gabriel and I have joked that from the very beginning of the relationship, I had two partners because Josh wasn't gone. As time is going on, Josh is taking up less of my time and less of my energy and less of my headspace. It's just true, but it's not like, and he isn't gone, but initially when Gabriel first met me, ooh, I had a lot of time in the day that I spent thinking about Josh, a lot of time in the day where I was dealing with emotions. And again, it's become less and less, And then I also think because I was dealing with certain grief things, I was in an interesting position. Gabriel actually ended up reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend when he and I had only been dating for 4 months. So he has a girlfriend now, and he's had a girlfriend for about a year. She's long distance. She's married to another friend of theirs, Valerie, and they live in California. But I initially actually had a really hard time with that because Gabriel and I had such a new relationship, and I was still dealing with my grief from Josh. But one of the things that was very interesting, being in a polyamorous relationship, you have to confront some stuff. And I had to confront what was my fear. And I realized, and I don't know how long this might have taken me otherwise, or if I ever would have figured it out. But what I realized was I was terrified of being abandoned because I felt like Josh abandoned me. And I had never admitted that. I had never admitted that to myself until Gabriel got his new girlfriend. And then all of a sudden, all of these strange feelings of fear of abandonment are coming up. And I'm like, what is this about? Why am I so scared? And that's when I made that connection. And that was so healing for me to admit all the negative feelings that I hadn't been admitting. That all these sensations of being not just abandoned, but somehow as though, what did you do to me? You made the decision to die.
And you say that and someone goes, well, they didn't choose that. But when you're left and that person is gone, that's what it feels like. It can feel like so many different things. And what being on social media and platforms is like, when your spouse dies, and if you think of this, yeah, people really do think like that. It's
And it's
not
okay.
like, no, it's like, no, yeah, we kind of maybe all thought it when you and that's one of the reasons of doing this podcast. So people can kind of ear hustle in and go, I'm not alone with that thought. Like there are other people out here thinking about this. I remember after Mark died, my son Alexander was in the military, and then my daughter left and went to the military. And I remember being in the house being mad, like, so you left and didn't have to parent anymore because you died, and now they're gone, and y'all all just left me in this house. I can relate to that.
And I think luckily I have a really great therapist, and she was just
child, talk about that. That is important.
and she was just we'd been working together for years anyway. And I have body dysmorphia, and that's where I started with her.
Okay.
But when I was young, I think it had a lot to do with the bullying. I think
For sure.
It had everything to do with the bullying. But I was like borderline anorexic for a few years. So, she was just super validating when I was going through that stuff, and really helping me realize, everything that you're feeling and thinking, it's fine. It's fine, and at the same time that I was realizing that I felt that way, I was also aware that it wasn't logical. Josh didn't have the capacity to make any other different choice. He really did, but that doesn't stop you from feeling that way. And
the brain is trying to reconcile all this, and we only only in our limited mind, we instantly can attach someone not being there with rejection, or they chose in different stuff. Your mind is going, we don't choose when we leave. But the brain and trying to do all that it happens more often than not.
Yeah. And I am thankful for being able to process that when I did and how I did. And then, I made a huge, big difference for me personally, but then it also made a difference in my relationship with Gabriel, where I became much more secure and understanding, like, he's not going anywhere, he's here. So
what are some hot topics or things that you focus on? Well, let me ask you this. On your TikTok, is it just things that are happening, or are there some points that you really want to make sure that you're sharing, or how do you develop your content?
I develop my content kind of along the lines of, what did I see today that made me think about something? And I do keep my content in general to being a widow and being polyamorous. I am a person of many facets, and I could go on about anti-racism, and I could go on about feminism, and I could go on about the situation in Florida ad nauseum, but I'm trying to keep my content to that.
Okay.
And sometimes that means that there is the intersection of the two things, but sometimes it means I'm talking about a very thing that's kind of more just widow focused. And then sometimes it's something that's more polyamory focused.
Okay.
And then again, the intersections on those two things. The community of polyamorous people on TikTok is very interesting because there is a very politically adamant subgroup that I appreciate a lot of where they're coming from. They're coming from a very Marxist point of view as far as decolonization and decolonization of our brains. And I appreciate that in a lot of ways, but we don't necessarily always jive, because I personally feel that relationships are very different from person to person, and their concept is relationships should be as egalitarian and equal as possible.
Okay.
I think that's a nice thought.
In theory.
In theory. But my experience in my own life is that there tend to be people who are a little more special to you. And that counts for friends too.
This is true.
I have friends who are so important as my friends. And again, Ricardo isn't even a friend. He's more than a friend. He's a whole different thing.
Right.
Which again, it's very hard to explain to people when they're like, he's your friend. I'm like, it's different. But I have very good friends who I consider my best friends. And there's probably 3 of those people, and I consider them all my best friends. And then I have friends that are really close, but they're not quite that level of intimacy and connection. And then you've got the friends that you're like, yeah, we're kind of buddies. We do stuff sometimes. Yeah. You know, that's what, to me, that's
it's that inner circle, outer circle, acquaintances, friends, and that whole, yes.
Yeah. And to me, that also plays into my world of polyamory. I have people who are more important to me in a very tight, intimate way. And then I have people who along good, and we're going to spend some time together, but I'm not going to take huge amounts of my time and energy and invest into them, because that's just not where we're at with our relationship. To me, that seems kind of normal and healthy. The idea of trying to really make everything completely egalitarian and the same, to me, seems like I'd probably, but that's me. Everyone has their own thing that they're trying to accomplish.
So what was it about Gabriel, knowing that you're so picky, that wanted you to connect with him on this deeper level, have a commitment, and do this?
Back to, gosh, I wish I knew the answer to that, right? What happened with Josh? You know, I will say, I'm gonna get a little woo-woo. I am a little woo-woo. Josh and I always felt that, yes, we were soulmates, but it wasn't exactly supposed to be husband and wife.
Oh, okay.
Our energy was kind of funny. And people often thought we were brother and sister. And I had a twin that my mother miscarried, and it was a boy. And when she was about 5 months pregnant, she lost him. And Josh and I have always kind of thought that's what he is. That's what we were. He was my twin. And so, yes, we were soulmates, but we also had an energy that was very
not quite sure what that was.
But not even sibling. Like, I could finish Josh's sentences immediately. Like, immediately upon meeting him. He could do it too, to me too. We would have the same dream at night sometimes.
So there's definitely a deep connection there.
Yeah, I mean, that's not
your run of the mill kind of thing there.
That's not your run of the mill kind of thing. I mean, I'd wake up sometimes and I'd start talking about a dream, and he'd go, yeah, and then this happened and this happened. I'd go, you had the same dream again. He'd be like, yep.
Wow.
You know, so I mean, that connection was and I didn't know this, but I hadn't shared that with my mother until he passed. And then she had brought up the question of, she had heard some interview with someone who had similar situation. Their mother had lost a twin in gestation. And they said that they always felt like they only had a half of themselves, and they didn't know where the other half was. And they didn't know that they had a twin. And then they found it out, and it made all sense to them. And she said, did you ever feel like that? Did you ever feel like, you didn't have a part of you? And I was like, Mom, I found that part of me. That was Josh. And she went, oh my God, I can't believe I never realized that. And she could feel it, and she could see it. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe how did I miss that? She
never put that two together.
She never put that two together. So that was Josh. That's not what Gabriel is.
Okay.
Gabriel and I are pretty convinced that we've been lovers again and again through history. Okay. This is not our first time around like this. And I don't really know how to explain that.
I think you did.
It's just we have these almost memories of each other.
Okay.
Almost. It's so yeah, as far as like, yes, I had a soulmate and I am very happy that I was with him. And I am so happy that I had him for 20 years as my partner and my love. And I am thrilled that I feel that I have felt another,
Do
that
you
I
think
found
you
another.
cherish love and see it like before it's like we know how fragile this is, and there's a deeper sense of appreciation for it to have come your way again.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I really, I'm not joking when I say after Josh passed, I really did kind of think like, oh, I'm never gonna have that again. That'll
Right.
never happen. Yeah, impossible, you know? And I guess I thought maybe I could have some fun along the way or something, but like it, that kind of connection wasn't gonna happen, I was sure. And now that it has, I do want to say to people on TikTok and in the world, I'm like, you don't know. You
Right.
don't know how many possible loves of your life are out there.
Yes.
You know? Who knows? I might even meet another one. And that's the thing that now that this has happened, I'm like, heck, there might be another one out there. I don't know.
Right. So I know this has been a good conversation, and I have two questions I want to ask you. One, what makes you happy now? Where do you find joy?
Oh gosh, I find joy in so many. I want to say I find joy in almost everything.
Okay.
I find joy in like the little flower I'll see on the sidewalk. I'll find joy in holding my dog in my lap. I'll find like I'll find joy in like that cocktail that I'm having. I'm like, oh, this is so wonderful. Gabriel and I are constantly pointing to the sunsets, to the clouds, to the trees. I mean, I find joy everywhere.
Hmm.
So that's that.
If you could give advice to younger Liz, what age range would she be and what would you tell her?
So this very quickly, when I first introduced my mother to Gabriel, I said something to Gabriel about, you're really lucky you got me at this point because I've changed and I've grown so much. And I'm like Liz 2.0. And my mom quit more like Liz 4.0. And we all laughed. Oh, she is. And she can get you. She's a sneak attack.
Okay.
So what I was going to say is, I think one of the things I would want to tell younger Liz more than anything is try to calm down and try to go more slowly and try to find more joy in everything.
Mm.
You know, I'm not trying to be negative in any way about Josh, but he was kind of a pessimistic guy in some ways.
Everybody has different characteristics.
You know, and I to a certain degree sometimes would reflect that pessimism. I'm definitely not pessimistic anymore. Yeah, I'm actually incredibly optimistic.
Good.
Yeah,
So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. It is,
I have.
and I'll let you close us out. Anything you feel like you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover, or words of advice, or anything you want to share or offer as we wrap this up?
Oh, I guess the words of advice are the thing that I keep saying, and I'll keep saying to people is, don't be scared to be happy. And I know it can be terrifying to do something new and do something different that might lead to happiness, but just try to go for happy. That's all I can say.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
I am so glad that Liz took the invitation to come to be a part of the Widowhood. She was so lively and so candid. This was the introduction to something that some people may have not been aware of. But I'm grateful for her to share her love story with Josh, her love story that she has new with Gabriel, and where life is for her. I hope that from this conversation, if nothing else, you will think of the ways of how you can find joy in your life. Yes, I am sorry for the person that you love that is no longer in this world. But you know what? You are here. And I hope that you'll find some way to create a life that you enjoy. It will be difficult step by step, but you are not alone. The widowhood is with you. And I want you to maybe look at some of the people that Liz recommended that she finds interesting on TikTok, or create your own community. Make your hood as you go through this journey and learn things about yourself. You can reach out to our website. Maybe you'd like to share your story with us, and then we'll be able to hear how you're going through this journey. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.